Good evening. Today, Monday, the 24th of May, I'm here to talk about leadership in COVID times. A leader is someone who is supposed to inspire. A leader is supposed to communicate, supposed to weave a story around what they would like to do and inspire the people to follow and to believe in their storyline. It's as simple as that. A leader is not a position of authority, or rather I should say leadership is not an authority, it is by choice. People follow a leader. But very often we find that leaders are thrust upon us and we have to follow them. And more often than not, that does not work out. Because these people or these leaders who are thrust upon us have zero following and they really don't know what they're doing. On the other hand, at the bottom rung of the ladder are many people who have zero authority but have a very large following because they help people on either side of them, on either side of the spectrum. So people come to them for advice, they come to them for suggestions, and they come to them for help. That is the leader. So during these times, it's very important to have someone who inspires you to come out of the morass you find yourself in, to extricate and get out and to think beyond where you are. I draw an inference to the men in the armed forces. The men in armed forces have a sense of camaraderie amongst themselves. Why is that? It could be because the men in armed forces, they live alike, they dress alike, they eat alike, they wear their hair alike, they suffer their misfortunes alike, and in times of victory, they savor victory alike. Now there's the storyline of a group of men in battle who were surrounded by the enemy on all four sides. And it was very, very tough going, it was grim. The enemy had surrounded them, they were outnumbered. Those guys had everything that these men did not. And it was fight unto death situation. So they were having the last supper together, after which they were expected to take up arms and go towards the enemy. So the men were talking amongst themselves and telling each other, what are we fighting for? What the hell are we fighting for? This is we are kind of cornered, we are boxed in. So they were confused. So they went up to the commanding officer and asked him, sir, what are we fighting for? The men would like to know what they are fighting for. Are we fighting for the tricolor? Are we fighting for the flag? Are we fighting for India? Are we fighting for our Prime Minister? Are we fighting for our parents, our grandparents, our wives, our children? Who are we fighting for, sir? So the commanding officer thought for a moment and said, no, you're not fighting for any of those. Get that out of your head. You're not fighting for the flag, you're not fighting for the tricolor, you're certainly not fighting for the Prime Minister, you're not fighting for your families, neither your wife or your children. You are singularly fighting for one thing and one thing alone. You are fighting to save the man on your shoulder. And let me repeat this. You are saving to fight the man on your shoulder. And if the man on your shoulder fights to save the man on his shoulder, and if that man was to fight and save the man on his shoulder, then you will come out as a singularly best fighting force that there is. There will be unity and there will be cohesiveness. That is what you must do. So the men went to battle and they fought as a cohesive unit. They did suffer a lot of people died, but a lot of people came out alive. And as the commanding officer had said, that is what brought them out alive. Their unity and their ability to stick together as a team. I would now like to draw a parallel to something what is called as ESS, extravagant sacrificial service, or to work well beyond your line of duty. There's a story woven around this, set back in the 1890s, almost 130 years ago. It was set in Philadelphia, in the Bellevue Hotel. It was winter, it was bitterly cold, it was raining, and there was sleet outside. It was dull, dreary, and very, very cold. An elderly man and his wife walk into the hotel, Bellevue, and asked for a room. The manager on duty at 1:30 a.m. said, "Sir, there is no room, and I don't think you will find a room tonight in the whole of Philadelphia because there is a big exhibition underway and all the rooms are full." So the man turned around and told his wife, "Unfortunately, there is no room. What are we going to do?" So the manager told them, "Look, I know it's very late and there is no room available. So why don't you and your wife, if you like, take our room? I know it will be a little small for you, but it will be warm and it will be comfortable." So the man said, no, I can't do that. So the manager said, "You have no choice, sir. There is no room available in the city and it's very, very cold outside." So the manager went to his wife and told her that we must shift out for one night, and I hope you don't mind, because there is an elderly man and his wife and they have no place to go. So the manager and his wife move out, and the man and his wife slept in the manager's room. The next day, they came to the manager and thanked him profusely for what he had done. The man said, "I did not expect you to do this for us. Thank you very much. And one day, I will pay you back. Believe me, I will pay you back." So the manager said, "Fine, sir. Thank you very much." Shook his hand, and the elderly couple went off. About a year and a half later, the manager received a letter from New York. And in the letter were 2 tickets for the manager and his wife to come to New York. And the letter said, I cannot forget what you did for my wife and I that day, that bitterly cold night in Philadelphia. And I would like to thank you, and I would like you to come to New York to meet me." So the manager and his wife went to New York to meet that man. They met him in his office. He brought them down to the street level and took them around the corner and said, "See in front of you." So the manager said, "What is that, sir?" He said, "This building. Can you see this big tall building? White building." So the manager said, "Yes." He said, "This is my new building I've built. It's a hotel and I would like you to run it." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "This is my hotel and I would like you to manage it for me." Because I could not think of a better manager, a more humane manager to manage my new hotel. The man's name was William Waldorf Astor. He went on to make the famous Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which was then managed by the manager in the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia, Mr. George C. Bolt, who became a very famous manager who took the Waldorf Astoria to dizzy heights. This is known as the Extravagant Sacrificial Service, ESS, and it is known as the Waldorf Principle. To go beyond the line of duty and to do something extravagantly, sacrificing your own comfort, without the thought of money, without the thought of reward, just doing it because that was the right thing to do at that point of time. The extravagant sacrificial service. There's another story attached to this, or similarly, coming from Disney Entertainment. Michael Eisner, the CEO of Disney, who took the company to dizzy heights in his time, in his visiting card, one of his job descriptions was a trash collector. Yes, trash collector. He would come out from his office every day, don his gloves, and go around Disney Park collecting trash from the trash bins. That was his assignment he gave himself. Because the epitome of Disney is cleanliness and equality of work. Just because Michael Eisner was the CEO does not mean that he should not collect trash. To work well beyond your line of duty, ESS, extravagant sacrificial service. If you do this, if you follow this principle, you will also go to dizzy heights. Good evening.